Cool. Okay, well, I think we'll make a start. As ever, people can join us as and when they're free, but I'm conscious that everybody is very precious about their time at the moment. So in this session, what we thought would be really useful to do was to talk a bit about people's journey from their brain injury through kind of rehab to sort of where they are now. And we could have got some real experts in to talk about that. We could have got some case managers, we could have got some OTs, we could have got some doctors, but then we thought, no, let's get the people who really know about this stuff. Let's get people who've been through that journey. So I'm really, really pleased that Amanda at Headway was able to talk some people into joining us for the session today. So we have Simona and Howard with us. Can you both give us a bit of a wave? There they are. Excellent. Simona and Howard are going to talk a little bit about their brain injuries and a bit about their journey and their sort of pathway to kind of where we are at the moment. And I hope that during the conversation, we'll be able to kind of pick up some of the things that worked really well and some of the things that perhaps didn't work quite so well in these cases. If you have any questions that you'd like to ask of either Howard or Simona, can I ask you to type them into the chat box and I'll try and pick those up as we go through and make it a little bit easier to sort of manage things if we do it through the chat. We'll have a go. So Simona, can I come to you first? Can you just tell us a little bit about what happened to you? How did you get your brain injury? When did it happen?
24 September 2019. I was driving from work back home and I did jump in front of my car, and because I wanted to save the deer, I hit the tree and the tree fell on me and on my head. And then I was 3 months in a coma. So yeah, because of an accident.
Yeah, and so were you taken straight to hospital? Did you go in an ambulance and into hospital?
Yeah, actually, they came to me by ambulance where I had my accident. They took me straight to Cambridge because Norwich Hospital, they thought that they realized that I'm in a very bad condition and I need to be taken straight to Cambridge, where is the regional hospital for problems, I think.
Yeah, so it's recognised quite early, and then the air ambulance gets you there really quickly. Do you know how long you were in hospital for?
3 months and 1 or 2 weeks.
So a long time. Yeah, it's several months in there. Okay, thanks for sharing that. I'm going to.
That was all in Cambridge. After that, I joined London Hospital for about 6 months. So in total, I would say about 9.5 months.
Yeah. So that first stage, with a sort of what we call the acute care looking after you, and then transferred to a different place for an even longer period of time. I'm going to ask Howard to join in now. Howard, can you tell us the first part of your story as well, please? What happened to you, and how did you spend time in hospital at the beginning?
Well, before my stroke, I was a self-employed builder, and I'd started doing a project at home. So in the morning, I was working on this little extension, stopped for lunch, and then just went and used the toilet before I went back out, and noticed that my arm, or my leg mainly, was not operating properly. Thought nothing to it, and dragged myself back into the kitchen, put my boots back on. Thought what a nuisance, and went back outside to do a bit more. And within a quarter of an hour or so, I found myself sliding down the garage wall and stuck. And I laid there trying to attract people's attention, but we're very rural, and I was down the side of the house, which wasn't obvious. Eventually, a courier driver stopped at the house, and I managed to attract his attention, and between him and the neighbour, they ended up calling the ambulance, and I was taken to James Paget.
Yeah. So working on your own like that, it could have been much worse. You could have had a really bad fall after the stroke. You could have not been found for quite a long time. Really quite a worrying situation. And so, do you know how long you were in hospital for when you went to Paget?
I was in there for 2 weeks, and they sort of gave me a bit of physio and got me up so I could walk with someone near me and things like that. But when I first woke up the next morning after my stroke, I was totally paralyzed on the right side. I had no sense of where my limbs were or any feeling in them. It's like somebody cut you through with a saw lengthwise.
Yeah, and we know that's a sort of classic result of a stroke, isn't it? We get an injury on one side of the brain and we get this sort of paralysis down the other side. Simona, did you have things like that? Can you remember? Was one side of your body more badly affected than the other?
Yeah, from all the stories I heard from my mom who was here with me, my right side was worse than the left side. So
Yeah, yeah. So obviously, in other kinds of brain injury, we get that similar kind of effect. In my own case, I had weakness down the right-hand side of my body. It wasn't completely paralysed, but I certainly had loss of sensation and awareness of that side of my body. So Simona told us that she left the sort of emergency hospital and spent a very long time in another place. Did you go somewhere else for rehab, Howard, after that stay in the Paget?
They had in the community team came out, so I came out and I'd get physios come out, a speech therapist come just to check to see if I needed any more help with that, and it was mainly on the physio sort of level of rehab, getting me to gain my balance again and a bit of dexterity in the sense of touching with my hand, putting things in a bag and trying to describe what I was feeling or pull out a certain object. And that lasted for 6 weeks. And
Yeah.
then they were about to refer me on to other places to help me. But that's when the pandemic hit. And that was about the end of my rehab for that period of time. And I was left
Yeah,
to
and we know that
continue.
COVID obviously interrupted so many things and made it much harder for people in those kind of situations. So Simona, Howard said that he was trying these sort of quite simple exercises to rebuild the kind of sensation and awareness, particularly down one side of his body. I'm guessing because you were in hospital for a really long time, you had much more fundamental things to learn. Can you tell us a bit about what you needed to relearn?
actually, when the COVID hit, I just woke up from the coma, so I was transferred to London. So I was lucky, I would say.
So could you eat? Did you need to relearn to eat?
I totally relearned how to eat, how to talk, how to walk, how to everything. Because I wasn't even able to use the toilet. I literally had to learn from baby stage.
Yeah. And were you aware of that? Some people have a brain injury and they don't really know what they can't do. And other people, we call it insight, they really can understand that and they're frustrated because they know they ought to be able to do something really easy that young children can do, but they can't. Were you completely aware?
Yes and no, I would say like half and half. I know that I really wanted to start to walk, and I was always moving in the bed to get down on my legs, and at some point I fell out of the hospital bed 3 times, and then they started to lift the rails up to
Mm.
keep me safe to the right.
Yeah, so giving you those sort of little tests and pushing you to make you sort of work harder. Howard, if I can come back to you, did you have sort of frustrations where the things that you really wanted to be able to do, you knew you could do, but were much harder now?
There were elements that I in my head I'm getting better, like as if you hurt your arm or part of your body in the old me. So I'm got focused, and that is what I'm going for, my old me back. And it was frustrating, these simple things that you just couldn't do anymore. And I I was in the 6 weeks from hardly being able to walk. I got so much recovery in that short span. I was able to go for a little jog down the road and things like that and ride a bicycle. So I thought, great, within another 2 or 3 months, I'll be back to normal. And I never, ever achieved the back to normal thing.
Yeah.
That frustrated me. And I also started to pick up on the little project I had with building, just the simplest of things, but the dexterity in my right hand just couldn't hold a screw, so I could put the screw in with my left hand and things like that. Everything became sort of such a simple thing. It was a big thing. And I'm very determined, so it wasn't as if I gave up lightly, and I could spend 5 minutes just trying to balance this screw, just right to start it, the screw and things like that.
And that must have been really frustrating to not be able to do something that you've done hundreds, thousands of times before.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Simona, did you have a similar kind of frustration that obviously some of the things you were trying to do were more significant than Howard, but I wonder if you get the same sort of degree of frustration in your case, you're trying to stand and to walk and knowing that anyone can do that, right? Even 2-year-olds can walk. How did that feel?
I still have that frustration in me, so I'm still dreaming that one day I'll become one.
And were you, like Howard used an interesting phrase, he said trying to get back to the old me, and we hear that a lot after brain injury. Were you keen to do that? Were you trying to get back to the old Simona and do all the things that you used to be able to do before?
I'm still trying to get back to the old Simona, so I think that's still my case at the moment.
And I'm clearly you've made a great recovery. You're at work, and you're doing things. Do you feel like you're nearly back to the old Simona, or is it still out of reach?
I would say like 75%. It's my own me back, but I still like some things, so
Yeah.
just take it easy. Whenever they come back, they'll come back.
And
I cannot
do you think you'll ever make
recover
that? Do you think you'll ever get that extra 25% and get all the way back, or is it never going to happen? I just wonder what you feel about it.
I'm scared. I don't know if I will go back to 100%. I think the most I can do is about 90%, and that's about it.
And would you be happy? Would you be content then, or would you think there'll always be something that's nagging at you?
I think I will always try to improve myself. Yeah. I'll always try to work on me, even when I'm gonna be 80.
Yeah, I asked the question because I reckon I'm probably 98%, and that 2%. I find that really difficult. Howard, can I ask you the same thing? Are you back to the old Howard? Do you think you ever will be?
I don't think I'll get there because I was a very physical person in my work, and I could, physically run and jump and play with the grandchildren, things like that. And I'm a slouch compared to what I was. I have fatigue issues that are really set in, but I find myself, I talk to my limbs to get them to do things because I don't know how else to encourage them, sort of thing.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think there's probably people on the call who would agree that really will work, right? Because we're making these neural connections and we're encouraging that stuff by doing these things. Josephine's put a question in the chat which sort of links to what I've been talking about. She says, what helped you come to terms with reality after that first sort of 6 weeks where you made massive improvement and then things sort of slowed down? Were there things that sort of helped you come to terms with what this was really going to be like, that it wasn't going to be a quick fix and it was going to be a longer term thing?
Not really. I just have this dogged determination to get to where I was, and still do, I suppose. But I'm slowly, the reality's dawning on me. And it's taken 4 years to say, well, you're never going to be back to where you were. So instead of trying some things, I even in the early part of my recovery, I was on the roof because I needed some roof work done. So I had a ladder up there, climbed on the roof, and sat there with all the bits I needed. But I found I couldn't manage because I'm now very conscious of balance, and what one hand's doing and the other didn't automatically reciprocate and be ready to hold something while I use the hand, and that just doesn't work. And it just brings on the fatigue very quickly in those situations and things like that. So,
yeah, definitely. I wonder, did any of the people that you worked with in that first 6 weeks, did anybody have that conversation with you and tell you that you'll probably see a really quick improvement in the first 6 weeks, but don't expect it's all going to get better and you'll be fine in 8 weeks?
no,
Did people give you a realistic idea of how long this process of recovery might take?
not really. I was isolated, it felt,
Yeah.
because
Do you think it would have been helpful if somebody had that conversation, or perhaps if you'd met somebody who'd been through a stroke who could tell you their story? Would that have been helpful to you?
that would have really been helpful. That's what I wanted, a sounding board for all these things I was going through. So if somebody had similar, they could say, "Oh yeah, that's how I felt," or give me advice of some degree, even just saying, "Oh, I was like that for 3 months, and then I found a way around it." Because it's not being able to achieve it as I could. You find ways around it. So you sort of manipulate things so your right hand doesn't have to do the same dexterity. Already you're partway there because you've cheated in some way.
Yeah, and we call it compensation, don't we? That we find other ways of working and we do other things with our bodies in order to kind of compensate for these things. Simona, I wonder if I can ask you the same kind of question. Did anybody? I know that your mum very kindly came to help look after you in those early stages. Did anybody talk to you or her about how long this recovery might take? What kind of thing you're in for in the longer term?
I always get along very well with all the nurses. I forgot her position now in the hospital. Pulse, from Pulse team, there was someone, and they always told me, "You will recover. It's just gonna take maybe forever, but you will recover."
Yeah, maybe forever. I'm not sure how helpful that is, but you knew it was going to be a long time before you could get somewhere. And could you see improvement? Howard described in that first 6 weeks, it was like, wow, that's amazing. Did you have a similar kind of thing? Were there some dramatic improvements early on?
Well, I did that when I had my first walk all by myself, without any Zimmer frame or without any sticks. So that would be like 4 months or 5 months, something like that.
Yeah, a long time, but that must have been an amazing moment when you did that.
It was so fucking good. Sorry for the English.
Absolutely, right? We've kind of really emphasized the tone there because it's massive. Was there a similar moment for you, Howard, where it was just like, wow, I can do stuff. I know I'm not all the way there, but I've made this great breakthrough?
That was in the very early days. I just got the physio would come around your house with a balance board or something, and you'd expect to see him again in a couple of days, and I'd work quite hard at it to make a bit of an achievement before they turned up. And yeah, I like the sense of getting better, and but then when that I was sort of, it just never seemed quite as dramatic as the first part, and you just sort of worked around things. And if I spoke to either the doctor or the people who were helping, that the stock answer is everybody's different, so you couldn't really read from that whether it was good, bad, or what was happening really.
Yeah, and that obviously is the real challenge. We talked earlier on about, talking to people early on about how long things might take, and we don't know because every brain injury is completely different, and every person is different, and we know it's going to take different lengths of time to do these things. If anybody's got any questions that they'd like me to put to Howard or Simona, please do type them in the chat box, and we'll kind of switch over and I'll call some of those out as we move ourselves along. Howard, we spoke the other day, and you said that there were some other things that weren't really sort of picked up when you were working with rehab professionals. Some hesitate to use the word, but sort of minor things that will cause a problem with you. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about that.
Well, there's sort of, I think their focus is getting you to do the basics of life. So you're able to feed yourself and drink and things like that, and walk and communicate. But in the background, my sense of appetite has gone. So I get reminded as to if I've had breakfast or lunch or something like that by my wife quite frequently. I do it, but it's more of a routine you try and set yourself. And then once I'm eating food, I haven't got the sense that you're full. So I can eat an enormous amount of food, which seems a bit strange. And then other things are the emotional part of your head, where I'd watch programs or see people and they had a real emotional story they were telling or expressing that they'd lived through or something like that, and you just take it all in. And now if the same thing happens, I'm sitting there like, well, why am there's a tear running down my face, and I couldn't quite work out why. And my empathy to other people has changed. I don't necessarily have the same sort of judgment of the empathy and how you would work with other people and things like that. So
interesting. I asked people about, I don't know, probably 4 or 5 months after my accident, have I changed? Am I different? And they said, you tell more dirty jokes than you used to, and you cry a lot more. I think that's probably still true. Simona, have you found similar things with emotion? And Howard talked about food and appetite. Have you noticed similar things yourself?
I wouldn't say about food very much because I wasn't even before my accident a big eater. But now I would say like I have no filter. I just say whatever I want to say and then I suffer consequences and I say sorry for the language.
Yeah, so we get that
But
disinhibition and stuff just comes out. Do you, if you do something like that, do you immediately think, oh, what have I said, and sort of regret it, or is it just it's gone?
it depends by the situation. Sometimes I think, oh, I made a mistake, I better apologize now, like in the next second. But sometimes it can pass even 2-3 days and then I forget and that's it.
There's gone, yeah. And are the people around you, are they used to that? They think, oh, that's just Simona, or do you cause offence sometimes?
No, they just got used to.
Yeah, it sounds like you've got a really, really supportive group at work who are really helping you to kind of get back into work and kind of caring for you, which is excellent. Howard, I guess you're self-employed, so getting back to work for you was kind of different. You don't have an organisation to kind of step into. How did you go about getting back to work? Are you back to work?
I'm at present, I'm not back at work, but in the first about a year into it, a person I'd done some work for in the past had a project coming up, and I explained my limitations, because now instead of, for example, fitting a door into a door frame, a new door in a house, which I'd expect to do within about an hour, maybe two at very most if something was awkward, it's now taken me half a day to a day. So I explained all this to this lady, and she said, that's all right, I'll still give you a go. So it was a little shop refurb. I spoke to a friend who'd helped on jobs with me in the past, and he said he'd come aboard. And I think half of the time he was keeping an eye on me to make sure I wasn't doing anything too silly or fall over, trip and things like that. And also he was there to help me lift things, because I lost a lot of my physical strength. I did this job and it lasted a couple of months, but I'd set out some ground rules when I started of doing a maximum of 4 hours a day for 3 days a week. And the job didn't have any deadlines, but then eventually a new tenant wanted stuff done and these deadlines came in, and I couldn't hardly drive home sometimes after work because I'd done 6 hours or something like that, and as I was driving home my vision would become blurred and things. So I just about saw the job out because I felt duty bound, but it was obviously more than I should have really.
Yeah, and really difficult. Yeah.
I was
regarding the hours you work. For example, I just had a conversation like a month ago with my manager, and he personally told me he doesn't want me to come back full time to work it because darker months are coming and it will be hard for me to drive back home because I live about 45 minutes away from work.
Yeah, so that you've got this sort of system set in place, and it sounds like Howard, you did a really sensible thing in trying to set limits on your time and how you're going to work. But it's really difficult to stick to those, isn't it, when you're working for different clients and you get other demands coming through?
in the sort of world I live in or work in, people have expectations, and I just felt that I couldn't keep up with it.
Mm.
And then the lady offered me some work about another 18 months later, and this was a lot smaller job, but by then my fatigue had got to the point where I couldn't do as much as I was when I worked for her last time. So I again sort of redressed the boundaries I was working with, but that became, I felt embarrassed by what I was able to achieve in that time scale.
Mm.
So I didn't see the job right through. I got other people involved to take over from me because it was pitiful, really.
Yeah, but you need to understand your own kind of limits, and I must imagine that's been really difficult for you to realise that you can't do that thing and fulfil that job.
Well, for that sort of work, that's my bread and butter, and when you can't do the simplest of things, it's a poor show, really.
Yeah, definitely. There's some comments, Howard, directed to you coming in the chat box. Jackie says, have you been in touch with different strokes? And there's the Stroke Association as well. Do you have any contact with any of these different support groups that might be able to help out?
Headway, my only real contact.
And Josephine says that you could get a medical review with a rehabilitation doctor at the Colwyn Hospital or a stroke consultant at James Paget if you discuss it with your GP, and then you can raise the issues like the appetite things that you were talking about. So I'll send you the message in full after the meeting, and perhaps you want to chase that up and see how we go. But Tracy's put the next thing that I wanted to talk about into the chat box, which is great, about fatigue. Because Howard, you've mentioned a few times this idea of fatigue, and I want Simona to ask you, you're doing, as you said, sort of controlled hours at work. Do you really suffer with this enormous fatigue sometimes, either at work or at home?
If, for example, I don't fall asleep at about 9:30 night in the evening, the next day I really struggle. I cannot stay awake for anything in the world.
Yeah.
I usually use my holiday and I just send an email to my manager and say, today I'm too tired to come to work, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And he's okay with that also.
Yeah, and it
So
really is crippling, that fatigue. Yeah, my accident was 13 years ago, and I still sometimes are just wiped out. And usually for me, it's because something stressful or difficult is happening. I just sort of thinking about my own case in terms of what you've been talking about, going back to work and stuff. So about 8 months, something like that, after my accident, someone offered me chance to go and do some work in Abu Dhabi for 2 weeks. And I said, look, I'll go if I don't have to work for more than an hour without a break, and I can have somewhere to sleep. And I was teaching students in universities, and I only fell asleep in front of the students twice. I was really proud of myself. It was so important to be able to succeed and to do stuff, and almost kind of the opposite of what you've just described, Howard, in that you really tried and you wanted to do something, but actually you got a knock back because you found actually I can't. The fatigue is too much, and I'm not going to be able to deliver this stuff and kind of do sort of where I am going.
That's
I
not
wonder how you overcome that. Where are you at the moment, Howard? You said you're not working, but are you keen to? Are you keen to get back, or are you now sort of accepting that I need to change who I am and what I do?
my fatigue at the moment is my controlling factor for anything, and I don't believe I can offer somebody sufficient time regularly to make it an employable situation. So I got taught some techniques at the Colemans and also Wollaston Hospital. They tell you about resting for about 20-minute periods between things, but I'm a bit bloody minded, and I want to get on. I think 20 minutes, I can just finish that in that time. So I push on and do these things and wouldn't have these little rests until, it's like I just collapsed because I was tired. And I've tried some of the rest techniques, and I end up finding it very hard to get myself in the place that I'm resting but not sleeping. So I sort of lay down still and quiet and think and try and think through, just breathe properly, breathe properly. Next thing, an hour and a half later, I'm waking up feeling groggy because I've dropped into a deep sleep.
It's dropped off. Yeah.
Yeah, but majority of the time, if I'm working on something, I would see it as a challenge to finish it, because that's why I'd set myself my goals.
Yeah.
Which doesn't help really. And
Simona, there's a question for you from Jackie. It says Howard's talked about fatigue being the biggest hurdle he faces. What's the biggest hurdle you face, do you think, at the moment, in terms of kind of complete recovery or just in managing your day and your life?
My vision, I would say, I think so, yeah. Because if for example, I don't have my glasses on, I cannot see anything because I see everything blurry and double. But at the end of this month, I'm going hopefully to have new glasses which will have something in the lens, prism of his called, to help me get my focus better on things and not to see blurry and double, because even at the moment, for example, I drive because, for example, my girlfriend lives 70 miles away from me, and I usually drive down there, and sometimes when I'm driving I get blurred vision, and then I just stop when I can and pull down the side like 2-3 minutes. I just close my eyes and I walk away after.
Yeah.
But I think at the moment would be my vision, my biggest one.
Yeah. So we think about vision in the sort of obvious things, or it's hard to see and it's a bit confusing, but actually it has a real impact on your life because you want to be able to drive places, you want to be able to go and do things, don't you? And those kind of normal activities. Yeah, absolutely. And Tracy's put a note in there that, if we don't take the breaks that Howard was talking about, then our bodies will just say you're having one now, right? Because you need that. Certainly, what I found when I try, I think we're very similar, Howard. We're type A. We're determined. If I tried to lie down and take a rest, my brain would just be full of worrying about the things that I was supposed to be doing, and it's that worrying that made me tired. So I wouldn't feel any better if I got up an hour later, unless I properly fell asleep.
For me, chocolate works in this case. I ate a lot of chocolate.
Yeah. Can I ask you both? Yeah, I mean, you're here because Amanda at Headway kind of kindly talked to you, and you kind of offered your time. I wonder how you discovered Headway. How did you get connected to the organisation, and what do you do with them now? Howard, do you want to go first? How did you find out about Headway?
I got a friend in North Norfolk who had a bleed on the brain 2 or 3 years before mine, and I was visiting him, and we were just talking about the symptoms we had and things like that. And he said, "Well, I belong to this Headway group, and you'll give it a go, give him a phone." I didn't at the time, but I'd been I'd started going to a gym through a scheme called Broadly Active, which was from sort of the doctors or referral for it, and I was getting on great there, and from sort of building myself up and on the running machine and things like this, and from fast walk to a trot to a little run and things, and I was liking it so much I ended up being about 10 minutes running and things like this, and just pushing a little bit of extra weight, and I thought that was great. But that's about 6 miles from where I live, and there's a driveway in the drive between each point. There's 2 different routes, and I took the route that I would have taken in my old me because it's shorter and more challenging, but I was taking this route and didn't realize the load I was putting on myself with the extra activity and this drive. And it got to the point where my fatigue was getting really bad, and I thought, well, what do I do here? I'll try that number my friend gave me, and that was to a Headway centre or something, and slowly got into the system that way.
Right. And what do you do when you go? Do you go to a group with a few other people and do sort of social activities and things? How does it work?
Well, this is a peer group thing online, because I think we're still sort of isolating a little bit at the time. And either Amanda will set a little subject to kick off the conversation, and we just generally sort of talk around the group, and it can range from sort of mobility or what how we applied for a benefit, or how one of us was doing, and just sort of either giving your comments or opinions and trying to sort of boost other people's sort of
Yeah.
stuff.
And Simona, how did you find out about Headway and join them?
It's complicated. After I came out of the hospital, I was sent back home. And I was okay when I was with my therapist that was visiting me because of COVID. And other than that time, when I was with them, I was very nervous. And my psychiatrist recommended me Headway. So I started with them through like this with Headway, with the old colleague of Amanda. And at some point, I thought, I'm better, I should just leave it. And I left it, and I went back to being angry all the time. So I'm back with Headway now. I want to stay with them for as long as I need to.
Yeah. And do you find it helpful? Do you find the peer support, talking to other people, is that useful to you?
Yes, a lot, yes.
And how do you find that you are helping other people as well? People who have had their strokes more recently than you, perhaps, who are just facing the things you've been through?
I'd like to think I was able to help, but I don't know. Sometimes it's just knowing other people are there, and they sort of give you a little bit of hope because they've been through it, or the odd occasion when I can throw something into the ring to give a bit of help, that makes you feel better anyway. Makes you feel you've got something left in the world to give.
Definitely. You certainly have. You've been very helpful to us. Now, Simona, do you help other people? Do people say Thank you, Simona, for helping me for describing, or do you just get the feeling that you're giving something back and supporting others? Is that valuable to you?
Yes, it's very valuable. And I think, I don't know if Amanda and Howard will remember, but at some point I was talking with one of my colleagues and I was telling him, like, I'm attending Headway because of what happened to me. And he was like, oh, I had a stroke and I don't have any support. And I said, you can come and join us one day. So
Yeah.
he joined. Matt, I don't know if you both remember. Matt Lane. But
Yeah, so sort of drawing and sharing it, the experience that you've had with other people seems really kind of valuable. I wonder if I can pull Amanda B in at this point, just to give the Headway perspective about how you find people discover Headway. Is it typical what we've heard, Amanda, and the kind of activities they're doing?
Yeah, I think so. I think a lot of people, I mean, a lot of people kind of find us through word of mouth, or, you know, a friend of a friend mentioned this. And, you know, with our ABI Connections project, one of the things we wanted to do is to kind of get the word out there a lot sooner, because what we find is that sometimes things unravel after people have been discharged from that early part of rehab. You know, as Howard and Simona have just said, you know, this recovery takes years. You know, it's not something that can sort of be contained within an NHS rehab period. And yeah, the great thing about like Howard and Simona coming on is that we can signpost them again back to the NHS. So I think I've done that certainly with a few people, to say that actually now you're sort of right for another period of rehab now, because it's been so long. So yeah, I mean, I think more and more we're getting more, certainly in the past year or so, we're getting much more referrals from the acute trusts, kind of just because we're getting sort of more awareness of what we do, and community trusts, and we're working really hard to kind of increase awareness. And of course, the Stroke Association, you know, have now been commissioned to do some great things for people that have had a stroke. You know, we're obviously still here too for them, and of course that whole great number of people that haven't had a stroke but still need exactly the same kind of support. So yeah, we're sort of trying to work in collaboration with them to make sure that there's nobody missed.
Great, thanks for chipping that in, Amanda. And there's some really useful links coming through in the chat box. There's a bunch of things for you, Howard, in particular, that I'll send you in an email after the call. Thanks, people, for sharing those ideas. We're running towards the end of our time together, but I wanted just to see if I could get you both to think ahead. So, Simona, where do you think you will be in 5 years' time in terms of your work, your life, your recovery? Is it going to be a different Simona when you come back in 5 years' time and meet us again? Because we'd love that. Where will you be in your life? What will you be like, do you think?
I think I will still be here because at the moment I'm considering, because work gave me a second chance. I would need to show them my gratitude for being here always. I guess that's understandable somehow. And yeah, I would come back here in 5 years.
Yeah, it'd be great. Do you think you'd be a very different person? Will we recognise you? Will it be the same Simona?
Oh, I will be the same short hair always and forever. This is actually one of the things I did when I came out of the hospital. I went and I cut my hair short.
All right, thanks. And Howard, what about you? In 5 years' time, will you be back to work? Will you be too busy to come on a call because you're mending somebody's roof? Are you going to be the new you, or are we going to tune in there with Howard bouncing the grandchildren on his knee and not caring that he's not at work because he's found a new niche? What do you think?
I think that I'll keep pushing and trying to make myself physically stronger and more able, and hopefully through that something will come about. But also, I can't think of the words. In my head, I want to sort of have a degree of acceptance that I haven't always shown or felt towards myself. I'm not exactly the kindest person to myself, as I say. and if I can accept it, and as with my age, I'm coming up towards what would normally be a retirement age. The combination of those might see me over the line to, oh, you've retired now. Now you can sort of sit back and then have a more relaxed life. That at the moment I feel I haven't, because I don't or can't work as such and earn money. I feel I suppose the word burden would be very strong, but that's a bit of the way I feel, really. If I have money in my pocket, I've got to have a real purpose for it. I can't fritter it away.
No.
Just because I've got half an hour free and I could have a coffee or something.
Yeah, I think you use a really, really important word there, Howard, the acceptance. And it's so important on so many different levels, accepting our limitations, accepting the new kind of personalities that we have, accepting the new lifestyle that we need to lead. It works in so many different ways. Really, you've said some really quite profound things this afternoon, Howard, so you should appreciate that. And you're not a burden. You're in both of you enormously helpful. There's been some lovely comments just coming through in the chat, thanking you both for your time, and I'm going to kind of join that and wrap up now. It's so important that we have people to share their stories so that we can see where the gaps are in the services that we deliver. There are all sorts of people on the call listening to you today who I know will go back to their teams and share the things that they've heard, and they can use that to improve their services and to help other people. So, thank you ever so much, both of you, for giving your time to us today. Thanks also for everyone who's joined the call. It's always really nice to see some new faces and some new names on the participants list, as well as some old friends joining us as well. We are running a whole series of these events through the year. Amanda Cousins will have all of you in her little black book, but look out for the emails as they come through. The next event is going to be our summer event at the Wyndham Rugby Club. We're nearly completely booked already, so if you're not signed up, you want to drop Amanda a line like straight away to make sure you get on the list and come, because we've got some amazing speakers coming for that session. We're going to have, as part of that session, a very similar thing that we've done today, and hear from some people sharing their kind of lived experience of brain injury, which I think will just be fascinating. And we have an international cohort of speakers joining us from around the world, and even as far as Wales, to come and talk. So it really will be a great event. So with that, I'll say thank you ever so much again to Simona and Howard for joining us. Really is very valuable and important for you to share your stories. So thanks so much and take care. Howard, I will send you the list of links and stuff that are in the chat that people pointed in your direction. And thanks again, everyone else, for joining us, and we'll see you at the next one. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Can I stay with them for a minute?